Great. So we have another guest with us today. We have Aline Bezerra, and she is a senior product marketing manager at Prefin, and she's a mentor, ambassador, and contributor at Product Marketing Alliance. And previously, she was a product marketing lead at Crown Peak. So it's great to have you on the show today, Aline. Thank you so much for joining in today.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. I'm happy to be here and exchange ideas.
Awesome. Great. So today's podcast, today's episode, I wanted to focus on customer interviews, and we have a lot of questions around that. But before we get into that, I wanted to ask one question that I have been struggling with myself. I have covered this question in a previous episode also, but and I've been going through a lot of job descriptions on product marketing, and I think this is something that a lot of product descriptions also miss out on, and which is why I wanted to bring that question again in this episode, and I wanted to understand what product marketing really is and how it is different from marketing in general. This is something that I have been struggling and recruiters have been struggling with a whole lot, and which is why I wanted you to start off from there.
Yeah, no, that's a fair question, and then the answer is probably not what you'd like to hear, but product marketing can mean different things in different companies, but the main thing is like it's a very strategic role. And for me, it's like you are, as a product marketer, you are the voice of the customer in the company. So you have to advocate for that. And, it's, like I said, it's very strategic, and it's a combination of like understanding the customer, understanding the product, understanding the challenges internally, how you can bridge different departments, how you connect sales with development. So communication is quite key, and it's very important. And that's why product marketing is a quite important role in the marketing is very like popular, because of this intersection, which makes it harder to show metrics, right? Values, because you touch in different areas, and that gets a little bit complicated. But yeah, it's a very, very strategic.
So I also believe that if we could, remove the role out of an organization, this product marketer's role out of an organization, what if we talk about the things that might go wrong without a product marketer, I think that helps us understand what product marketing is better. So if you could talk about that a bit.
Yeah, so like a lot of things are going wrong if you take because you're going to find different departments doing the job of a product marketing, not a single one, right? So marketing will try the best to work on the positioning, but then you might not have consistency because sales are not in line with what the positioning messaging is, the product. So everyone needs to be in line, and that's also the role of product marketing within the organization. So that way the position and messaging work. So that can be wrong. You can spend a lot of money marketing with like tactics that are not working, because normally the product marketing is the expert on the customer, on the buyer, and product marketing can help marketing to define the best way, most cost-effective strategies to reach that prospect, the audience. Sales enablement, the sales cycles can be very long, and as a product marketing, you can help to make the sales cycle shorten by doing sales enablement. The customers interviews that we are going to talk today, you can implement a lot of what you find on the customer interview in the sales enablement process to help them. So all these things can short the sales cycles, and then there's impact on the product as well, because there's always that thing that we can develop features that customer doesn't really need. And if you are talking with customer, understanding the customer, you can feedback, you can use the data and feedback to the product team. So if you don't have a product marketing, it can be very, you can succeed, some companies can, but it's going to be high cost, and it's not going to be as efficient and effective as if you have a product marketing team involved.
Totally. Before I came across product marketing in general, I always thought that this was the role of a marketer in general. But then as I started understanding this space more and more, I realized that this is a much more specific, specialized role, and in that sense, it all makes sense. Great. So let's get into the core of this podcast episode and talk about customer interviews, right? So what outcomes do you expect from customer interviews as a product marketing leader? How do you even identify and prioritize which customers to interview?
So customer interview is really important. It's the core, it helps you to go to the right direction. So the way I do is first I define the kind of interviews that I need to do, right? Because there are different customer interviews. So I think today we are going to be talking more about customer feedback interviews. But I also, just to remind here, to remind the marketeers that exit interview is very important. So if you lose a customer, you want to understand why. So that's an opportunity for you to go and interview. And then you have the win and loss in a deal. Those are great interviews as well. I've learned so much from those interviews and helps with the buyer persona. And then the customer feedback, of course, what we are going to be talking today, it's super important for many aspects. And what I look after, the priorities is to understand the customer needs, pain points, their behaviors. So with those things, I can do a lot. I can understand and update the buyer persona, messaging, positioning, go back to the product, onboarding, process, marketing with the behavior. So the outcome that I expect to have is like understand the needs, their pain points, and how they behave during the sales process and using the product as well. So yeah.
Great. A bit on this, but could you describe your process of preparing effective customer interview questions? What tactics do you use to ensure that you're not leading the customers to a particular answer? How do you handle situations where customer feedback is contradictory to the internal hypothesis or the data that you have at your company?
Yeah, it's a good one because it requires a bit of work and data. You need to understand your data, right? So it depends on the size of the company and you know the number of customers that you have. I get the data and I started to segment the customer. So the first thing that I do in the process is before I build the interview, I segment them because they will behave, if they are large enterprise, they'll behave in a way, they'll have some specific needs compared to a mid-size company. So I try to segment them. And then if you have like a global reach, is the same. Like, for example, here where I was working before, we are targeting different countries in Europe. So they have different behavior. So it's always nice to keep a balance between like, I have customers in UK, customers in France. So it's good to get a certain numbers of customers in UK, certain number of customers in France, and then you can even compare their behavior, how different that is. So I try to keep that mix first, and then I build the questions. I try to understand if you don't have a lot of customers, because sometimes you have to interview like tons of customers, but if you don't have, you have a small number, then you can do even like a research. You can go to the account manager and try to understand each customer before you go to the interview. You can understand them better and ask more, and then you can prepare the question based on that as well. So it's good to have a good mix of customers. Of course, you know, if you get the same type of customers, you're going to get always the same type of questions. So if you have a large database, then you can segment them. And then in terms of, I think the second part of the question is like, if there is some of the feedback of the customers doesn't match with like the data, the hypothesis, the data that we have, right? So I create all these questions, which I mean, it means that I'm going to ask all of them. I try, but I try to make the conversation as comfortable as possible, and one question lead to another, and I try to follow that so I can get the information that I need. So of course I have the question that is the most important one that I need to ask to every single customer, and I know that I need to ask them that question. And then sometimes there are things that doesn't match with what internally, and then the best way to do is like capture and dig deep into that question. So for example, if you ask a customer, if there is one customer saying something that is very different from the data that you have, you take note, but you also like, you know, ask like them to give an example in an informal way so they are more comfortable. Normally they are quite happy to talk if they know that it's not a sales call.
Yeah.
When you introduce yourself, you say like, you know, you make them comfortable, say like, I'm product marketer, I'm the voice of the customer here, so I would like to really understand like what are your needs so we can implement and explain the reason why you're doing this interview as well, what he's going to get out of this interview. Right. And then you can see if there is one customer that is giving that information that the others are not, then maybe something only specific for that customer, and you can then take it to the account manager and share with them, and then, you know, so maybe see if there is a possibility of losing that customer. So we want to try to avoid that. But if you start to see a pattern, then I get that data and I bring it internally. I discuss internally, but you have to be open-minded, because this kind of contradiction, sometimes it tells you that there is a problem somewhere, and that's what you need to know and find out so you can fix it. And then you bring it internally and you put in a positive way. So people are also learn, you know, it's all about communication, how you send the message so people are not upset. You know, because sometimes they're so convinced, no, this is what the customer needs, this is what the customer needs. And then you convince yourself, and then you speak with customers, no, we don't really need this. You know, it's like,
yeah.
Well, they can tell, look, this is not as important as you thought, but this other feature here is actually more important. So why we don't focus on this?
Yeah.
So that's why this kind of like feedback and interview is very important. You can move the needle quite a lot having customer feedback.
Lovely, lovely. And let's say that in these interviews, a customer gives you a vague or a surface level response. What techniques do you employ to, you know, dig deeper into the actual answer? And could you give an example of a time when you successfully uncovered the root cause or a deeper insight during an interview?
Yeah, this is good because it's a good question, because sometimes we tend to ask questions that the answer is yes or no, and then you die there, right? So when the answer is vague, I ask them to like, I say like, I really say like, I'm not getting it. Can you explain a little bit more? Can you like elaborate? What do you mean by that? Can you give an example?
Yeah.
And then they go a bit more deep into the detail. I had an example. There was it was quite a surprise. It was a good one because we're doing the reports like some time ago in a company that I worked. We was very intense in terms of like volume of transactions thinking happening in the product every day. So I used to monitor the product, and one of the reports we noticed that there was a feature that we thought the feature would be great. The usage was very low. And then there was this only one customer that they even increased the license just to use that feature. And I was like, this is weird. There's something wrong here. Let's do a customer interview. Like, let's get that profile of customer that we built that feature for. Let's do an interview with them. So I had a controlled number, so it was good because I could, dig like more and to understand who they were. And we went to the interview, and we asked the question. There was a lot of fake questions. Like there's like most of them was like, oh, we don't need that feature. And I was like, okay, you don't need that feature, but why you think you don't need that feature? Or like, can you give me an example? Like, do you think that you don't need it because of what exactly? So it was kind of like informal, make them comfortable with the conversation, and then the answer was that they didn't really know the value of the feature, how to use the feature. And the only customer that knew, it was making the most of it. And we even increased the license because they were using that feature for a use case that we didn't focus on. And we're like, oh, okay, so you're using the feature for this specific use case. So you are giving this to your customers in that location because like it was at the COVID time and it helps with the mobility, and we didn't like realize that, and the other customers neither because we didn't communicate the value properly. And so I took back that information and I went to the marketing team, and that's where like marketing team was super helpful. Like let's make a campaign to drive adoption of this feature. Let's focus on this, and it was great. But only doing this only because one customer that increased the subscription, the license to use that specific feature that we found out why other customers were not using it. So that's why it's very, very valuable to talk to customers actually.
Lovely, great. And I should have asked this question earlier, but if you could, talk a little bit about Prefin and your work at Prefin.
Yeah.
Let's get to that part again, if we could.
Yeah. No, that's it's fine because it's a different stage. I'm working in a startup. So Prefin is a startup. It's a fintech blockchain. And I started there like 2 months ago. So I just started, and I'm going through my 90 days process. Where I need to launch a new product, completely new product. And a customer interview, for example, is in my list, but it's quite hard because we do have a few customers and projects that we are already working on for the launch, the initial adopters. But we don't have the amount of data that I would have if I have a huge customer database. But basically, Prefin is a blockchain fintech. And the new product that is coming in the next couple of months, I'm going to be launching. It's very exciting because it's supporting like central banks with the digital currency, and it's open doors on our new like infrastructure using public and private blockchain. So it's very exciting, very challenging, very complex product to translate the positioning message. I'm doing that now. But I also worked in different sizes of company, like you mentioned, Crown Peak before. We are like huge. We are 400 people, different products. Before that, I worked InfoBip. And size companies, so it's like very tense. Actually, this example came from InfoBip. It was really, really good experience to learn because a lot was going on in the product. Very, very fast development and a very large database of customers. So the customers interview there was great. We could get a lot of data. Now with a startup is a bit of a challenge. So I need to find like, I try to talk with prospects. Another good tip is like, if you cannot interview customers right now, sit on sales calls, ask sales, like, can I sit on your call? So you can learn what customers are asking, what are their pain points, what they need, and you can start to get the data, and then you can validate that data after when you have like a database. So that's a good thing to do. Or if we have like a more established product in Prefin as well. So sometimes I can leverage some of the customers there to get opinion on the product. But yeah, with the startup, as you probably know, is a little bit different. So you have to to try to get the data, and then keep like reviewing, keep an eye on the market and what is going on, and try to get as much as data from different people.
Great. And I was recently, actually, I had an interview and it was around product marketing. It was a job interview for a product marketing role, and that product was a very technical product, and I did not have any background in that space. So I struggled a bit. They wanted to bring me in, but because I did not have the technical know-how of that space, it wasn't a great fit. But which brings me to a question where if you do not have enough background in a particular space, now in B2B, you might have to deal with a very technical product, right? But so as a product marketer, is there any way to navigate through such a situation where the product is very technical, you do not have a background in that, and you want to work at such a company? So how would you go about that?
Yeah, I think like you have to demonstrate to them that you can learn, right? Because if you know all the steps that you have to take in product marketing to get to the goal that you need, then that's halfway there. But if you can learn the product, then I think the companies are more comfortable. And in a lot of industry, it's quite hard to find product marketing that is expert in product marketing and in the technology.
Yeah.
So if you demonstrate like, okay, it's a complex product. This is how I would learn. I would spend time with the developers. I would, spend time product management team. And this, like the moment that you say that you are interested in really understand the product, understand the technology, that plays a big role as well.
Yeah.
And then you can explain how you do, because they need also to think on the customer. The customers are not going to be experts in the technology either.
Yeah.
So they cannot go with the tech language to the customer, especially if there's unique technology like blockchain, for example. The customers will not understand. So you have to go through the process of educating customer and talking the language that the customer will understand.
Yeah.
So who is the best person to do this? Is the product marketing who has is learning about the product, getting all the knowledge, and then you translate that in a way that the customer will understand. So that's why you have to explain to the companies how you approach and how you do things and how you learn. So you can learn the technology, right? Yeah. You can learn, and you have the skills to translate that to the customer. So that's great.
Totally. Great. Now coming back to the user interview bit, right? So how do you balance the need for the for detailed information while keeping the conversation comfortable and engaging? Sometimes, we could really get into it, but then might not make the conversation very engaging. So how do you go about that?
Yeah, it's quite hard sometimes. Depends on the person, right? Some people are very easy to talk, others are more like, hard to get information to. So I always try to make them comfortable, try to build a relaxed atmosphere, like we are talking, not here to it's not like a job interview type of thing, or I don't know. I just try to make them comfortable, personal. I explain I explain a bit of my challenges and how this would help me, and I thank them, and I make them feel valued, because they are like the feedback they're gonna give to us is like essentials to make the product better for them. Yeah. So I try to do that, and I'm trying to make into a conversation. But there are times that you need to go deep, like, if we're saying like there was sometimes you get customers that are very unhappy, and that's why they really want to do that customer interview. And then on the customer interview, they're going to start to point everything that is not working. And normally what I do, I apologize, and sometimes I apologize, I don't know about this, I'm going to check, and then I can get back to you. So I take notes to make sure that I go back to that customer and give them the answer. So I try to identify red flags and where they feel frustrated, and I try to I understand where you're coming from. I even sometimes ask them what do you think would be the best solution for you? Because then they can come up with ideas as well, and I can take that with me. So you have to find the balance in the moment. That's why communication is also very important in product marketing, because you have to get sometimes if the customer is really upset, you need to make them feel that you are on their side. I understand your pain. That's why I'm asking for this interview. I'm gonna try. We are doing this because we want to help, and then you can go deep and still keep them engaged in the conversation.
Yeah, great. Also, if you could, explain how you've used customer interview data to influence product positioning or messaging. What specific changes did you make based on the customer insights? How did you measure the impact of those changes on the product's market performance? If you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, of course. So in positioning, we focus on the key differentiators, right? And then in the message, normally what I do is my position is focused on key differentiators. What is the value that only my product can provide? The message, I focus on the pillars. So I'm always looking at what the customer, listening very carefully to the customer to understand, what is the value that because sometimes they don't even know that the products can deliver that value to them because our message is not good enough. So in the interview, we're trying to understand their problems, their pain points, and then I bring that back to position. So what it changes, the positioning once it's done, and then I keep updated every time there is a big development in the product or something happens in but the messaging I keep updating quite a lot, and I use a lot of the customer insights. So ideally, I update message. I review the message every quarter because I will be having like customers interview every quarter if I can. In reality, sometimes, especially in startup, you cannot do that. So I try to do like twice a year, for example, and then I take that to the messaging. For example, it happens like before when I was in Crown Peak, we are very focused on was e-commerce AI product recommendation for e-commerce, and we are focused on one value. There was one AI feature that was helping with conversion rate. So we are talking about this conversion rates, and all that. When I was started to talk to customers, customers were saying like, oh, we don't really care about this because we have all the strategy that we do to do the conversion, right? Like our marketing department are focused on that. What we really care is that this saves us a lot of time, because before I would have like one person sitting there doing like all the recommendations, manually for a sale that is going to go live the next day, and that would take us like many hours of work. And now with AI, is automatically. So this is saving us a lot of time and is more accurate as well. And then we changed our messaging, and we could see the impact. So I started to monitor the engagement with the content, the feedback from the customers that we are like cross-selling this specific feature. So we started to monitor, and we started to see a change because they started to understand, oh, okay, so this is going to save me tons of time. And then so this is one of example of how I use in the customer insights. But I also go back to product a lot to give them insights. Sometimes it's just like, it's not going to change a lot of development, but it's good for them to know, this is working very well, customer is happy, these other things, not so much. So maybe we can have a look at this in the next meeting. So yeah, and then I monitor how it was before and how it was with the new message and positioning, and using the customer's insights. So yeah, it's extremely helpful and important for product positioning and messaging for sure.
Awesome. For ensuring a diverse range of customer perspectives in the interview process, how do you ensure that there is inclusion of outlier customer opinions or those from less vocal customer segments? And what measures do you take to avoid biases in selecting customers for interview?
Yeah. So what I normally do, like I said before, I go to the data that we have and I segment them, and then I go and I build the interview. I segment them because it's also like important to understand like each category of customer. But if you get a customer like that is sometimes I say spillover, is not part of our main target,
yeah.
But then. But they became a customer because they need the product for some reason. So I think it's also sometimes also good to understand them. If you have the time, even if your focus, your target, let's say to go to market this year is not a specific customer, it's sometimes good to talk to them to see what is their feedback and opinion. It might be completely different from the other customers, and it might even help you. It will like with positioning messaging as well, give you another angle of how they are using the product. And then you can take that internally as well and see when you started to plan for the next year, if that kind of customer is the one that you want to focus more now, what you can do for that kind of audience. So I normally do that. And then to avoid bias, it's like I try to, because like I said, I like to make like more conversational, like less like interviews, so the person is also comfortable to share. Yeah. I also say there's a very safe space, that's genuine for us to improve our services and product. And then there are the questions that I know that I cannot leave the interview without asking. So some questions I might miss because I can get the answer from something else that we're talking about. But some questions to avoid bias, I want to ask that specific question to the same to all the customers. So yeah. I mark those questions, and that I know that I need to ask them. So that's one of the ways that I avoid bias as well. And then you have to be open-minded, because you're going to get also different types of people, also different ways that they communicate their feeling of the product, the way that they use. So you have to be open-minded as well, and taking consideration and not change the answer, not interpreting your own way what they are saying. If you don't understand, ask. Yeah. So like, sorry, I don't really get it. Can you explain a little bit better? Like, yeah, just like give me an example. Like, don't be afraid to say like, I don't understand what you're saying. So yeah, so that's how I normally do.
Definitely. Awesome. Great. And how do you handle and incorporate negative feedback from customer interviews into your product strategy? Can you provide an example for a critical piece of feedback that led to a pivot or significant change in the product feature? And how do you ensure that negative feedback is constructively used rather than dismissed right away?
Yeah. No, that's good because negative feedback can be a little bit delicate, right? There are people that are not so good with feedback. But for me, the negative feedback, it means improvement. There is an opportunity for us to improve. So let's see that negative feedback as like, okay, I found one challenge, one problem. So now I can make it better because I don't know what I don't know, right? So if I don't ask, customer doesn't tell me. If they just say, oh, it's fine, everything's fine, it's going to keep the same way. So I really appreciate when there is a negative feedback, and like we were saying before, like dig a little bit deeper to understand a bit more what is this, because sometimes it's not even like problem with the product, but like I said, product with like is in product marketing not giving the message of the value of that feature, for example. So it's very important that you take that negative feedback in a positive way, and then, so for example, I was like, once there was this customer that was coming to the office. I was doing this interview, which was taking a bit time. And I knew that there is a customer coming to the office. And I asked the account manager, can I join? Because I have this customer interview that I want to do with them. They said, okay, but if I'm in the office, it's better because it's face-to-face. So they were happy with it as well. And during the interview, they were very negative about, they need to get a data from the system, and they couldn't, because our product was not designed to give them the data, because we never felt like they need to have that data. And they were like, oh, every question that I would ask, they would go back to that, not being able to get the data. And it was like, at some point I was like, okay, I'm gonna get there. But since you're asking so much, tell me, why do you need this data? How is data so important? And they said, like, because we need to pitch to other people in the company. So we need to pitch to like the C-level, other people, the products. Every time we do our report internally, they ask about this specific number, and we cannot articulate that because we cannot get it. So we cannot explain. We get in trouble, and when we get to renew the contract, this is going to be very helpful if we can explain to them, like, maybe I cannot get this number here, but I'm going to get this number there. Something. They were like, give me something, and they were like, it's impossible that you cannot get this data in your product, because it's like AI is all about data and blah blah blah. And I was like, okay, let me discuss with the product team, and then we see if we cannot extract the data. Maybe there's another solution. I don't know. Let me talk with them, and then we can discuss it again. And then I did that with the product team, and they were aware that some customers were asking that data, but they thought it was not important. And then I explained them why it was important, because there were people higher level that was asking. And if we cannot provide, we explain why. If that's enough. Anyway, we did some work. They managed to find a way to get that information to them, and then the second stage would be to really build a report that they can extract not only that data and many other data. And then we went back to the customer and we said, like, for now, this is the solution, and this is how you can explain to your boss. But the team is in the roadmap. We are going to work on a better way to extract this report. And then they were absolutely like, fine and happy. But they were very, very negative. Everything that you're talking to them, they would go back to the data. I was like, I'm not even talking about this. But it was good because a lot of other customers wanted that data as well. So it was not, we found out, because then I started to ask in the interviews, do you need this data? And they were like, oh, it would be great if we had that. It would help us with this and that. So we even changed a bit the interview questions based on this customer. So yeah, and then you have to also explain internally, right? This negative feedback, not just go and say like, oh, customer is complaining about this. Right. And then you have to explain, like, we have very good feedback opportunity for us, to improve the product. You spin in a positive way. Like I said, that the feedback is an opportunity for improvement, right? And then when I did that, the team bought in and was like, okay, let's discuss internally what we can do, and then we move on from there. So it was a very nice experience, and the account manager was like, oh, you handled very well that negative feedback. I was struggling with that for a few months.
Ali, I need to put this on the record. This has been one of the most fun podcasts that I've done so far. I've been laughing a lot throughout this podcast. So, I mean, I just have to put it out there. I'm just enjoying this one. Great. Awesome. So let's get to the other one, right? Once you're done with the first set of customer interviews, especially when you just join an organization, what should be the cadence of customer interviews after that? How do you measure the long-term impact of incorporating customer feedback into marketing and product iterations? How important is it after you are done with the first set of user interviews or the customer interviews?
Yeah. So after I've done with that, got all I need to continue to do my work, my project, I see how often I really need that feedback. And when I mean I really need that feedback is because sometimes often I've been the solo PMM, right? The only product marketing person, and then there is that much that I can do. So sometimes it's not realistic to do every quarter because there's a lot of things going on. But ideally, I would plan to have every quarter, and I would have that interview feedback with customer. But it's also important if we can give something back, right? Because always asking for interviews and giving nothing back, at some point they will not want to do it. So sometimes I see like, okay, if I have a good speed of development, things happening that I can give something back to the customer every quarter, then I do the interview every quarter. If not, I do like twice a year, the interview. And always like explaining the customer why, what we're doing this, why we're going to get that, and trying to keep them updated with as well. Like, this is the results, this is what we're going to do following the feedback that you gave to us. So that's really important. So realistically, most of the time when I was a solo PMM, I would do like twice a year, but I would not miss a win and loss interview. I would be like on top of sales to get those, because you can get a lot of information from that as well, even like why they choose the product or why they decide to go with the competitor. And I try to sit on sales call as much as I can when I know that there's something happening with a specific like account that they are trying to sell. I ask them. The other way that I get customer insight is also case study, because sometimes like I worked like Company before, we were outsourcing case study, and then I asked like, I was super busy, but if there's something that I would like to do is the case study, because I can get a lot of insights during the interview of the case study as well.
Yeah.
So you have like to juggle a little bit if you are the only one, but ideally twice a year or every quarter if you can. And then the way that I measure impact is with customer satisfaction. So sometimes some companies, you have the customer success managers that are running the NPS and customer satisfaction surveys. So I work with them on that, and I keep monitoring to see, if that changes after I share the feedback, the insights with all the departments. So I check the customer satisfaction, NPS score, the retention as well, because sometimes you do the interview because you are losing some customer you want to retain. And then so I keep that on track as well, before and after. And I monitor the engagement with the features and with the messaging for the content. Because like I said, I'm always like reviewing and updating the messages, so we stay relevant and we focus on what the customer really needs. So I monitor that as well. And then I monitor more often, especially the features, because sometimes you can pick up on something like, I need a customer interview for that. So yeah, so that's the best way is like being very realistic, because I wish I could have time, especially in a startup that you have to do everything. So sometimes you have to find different ways to get the customer feedback that you need.
Yeah, totally. That makes sense. Great. And now switching gears, what key qualities do you look for in a product marketer when hiring? And how do you assess these qualities during the interview process? And also, can you describe a time when a candidate particularly impressed you with one of those qualities?
Yeah. So like, you've probably noticed, like, talking through all the customer interviews, how I said communication is important, right? Because you have to talk with a lot of customers, very different people, different personality, but also internally to give the customers insights to the product team. Is a way that you're talking a product team in a way, you're talking a different way with marketing, you're talking a different way with sales. So communication is important. So when I, in the interview process, what I'm looking for is like the way that the person communicates and, explain their experience and so on. The other thing, strategic thinking, because again, you can pick from the interview, and it's just like, you can see strategic thinking you're going to use for many other things, right? But since we're talking about the customer interviews, you have to see, the customer that are very upset, how you can manage the situation that you can get the most of the conversation, right? If they're giving very negative feedback and focus on that, how can I get that, but also get him to get all the information that I need? And you have to be able to take the conversation in a comfortable level that you can, move questions around. You don't have to be strict to that, but you get all the information that you need. So I think that kind of thing also needs a little bit of strategic thinking, which you're going to need for everything based in product marketing as well. And then empathy. It's very important to have empathy, and especially nowadays that we work very remote. Sometimes some people forget about human in the other side and they are very busy. People are busy. People are like, you have to be considerate about their time. You know, you cannot waste customer times in interviews because they're going to be very upset. So I look these three key things like strategic thinking, empathy, and communication, right? And then you can get the knowledge of product marketing, how they do things throughout the conversation. But these are the key things. And an example was in my previous company, we were going through a lot of merge and acquisition. So we got to a point that we have like different products together. The acquisition was quite fast. So in a year, we bought like 2 companies, and then we had like 2 acquisitions from past years. That means that each product, there were different product teams that came from different companies, right? So they have different ways of work. So launches and releases was a challenge because, yeah, there was no like a smooth process, and I was trying to put that process in place, and I needed someone to help. So during the interview, I asked like, how do you do that? This is the situation that I'm going through right now, and I need someone to help because it's basically a lot of products, different process, and we need to bring everyone together. How would you do that? And then the person was very good in communicating how they would do it. They were very good on taking consideration the colleagues' feeling because of integrate different companies coming together. You know, there's a lot of changes. People are like very emotional. So the person, you know, took in consideration to say like, yeah, like people have these feelings, so I would try to listen to them and see what things that they were doing that work, what things that they were doing that didn't work, and then bring them together to build the process. So not leave them at the end and say like, this is how we are going to be doing launches and releases from now on. But rather than doing that, I would then, and she said, I would then bring them from the beginning and discuss with them, this is the process, everyone agree. This was like with the product managers. And I really like it. I really like her question because she was very good at communicating it and very good at communication because she wanted to talk to them and bring them. She was very strategic in thinking like also they come from different companies, they have different feelings with the integrations. And yeah, and empathy. So she showed that she cared about the colleagues. So we hired her, and she's still there. I left the company, but she's still she's still there. So yeah, it's good because she was a little bit concerned because she didn't have a lot of product marketing experience. But I said to her like, I need someone that can bring these people together, and then the rest you can learn.
Correct.
So yeah.
And so these are on the more soft skills side, right? If you could also talk a little bit about the strategic thinking part or the planning abilities, right? What type of questions or tasks do you use in the interview process to assess these kind of abilities, these kind of skills?
Yeah, I would always try to use like a real use case, like a real example. So just to stay on this one, for example, this one was like about launches and releases, and then to assess like the more the strategic thinking and the technical side. I also asked how would you do a product launch, for example, right? And then she would start to tell me all the steps that she would go through and things that needs to do the launch. And so the reason I say that's because there's a lot of like presentation tasks, right? You go for an interview, you get to close to the final stage, and the final stage, they ask you for a presentation task. I'm not a big fan of asking for presentation in the interview process. If it's part of the process of the company and I have to, then I have to follow and I have no choice. But if I can fight against, I do. And the reason why is because people spend a lot of time, and I know because I go through interview process as well. You spend a lot of time doing presentation, right? But also you're gonna I'm gonna get a lot of insights on the things that the person can do and what they understand from the task. But also you have a lot of people that can help you to do that. You have a community of product marketeers that talk with each other, so you can get a lot of help. It doesn't necessarily mean that when you get the job, you'll be able to do the job. So I prefer, instead of asking the person to spend a lot of time, doing a presentation, I prefer doing the interview, get these use cases and ask them, how would you do a launch? Or what would be the steps of a go-to-market for you, and tell me about, something that any launch that you've done, or if if the person is honestly like, I haven't done one, and I would ask like, tell me something that gets close to a launch. I don't know, maybe you have a specific campaign that you have to launch. So I try to assess their knowledge and the technical skills by using real use cases and giving them the opportunity to explain that, rather than giving a presentation that they take home, and then God knows who did the presentation for them.
Yeah. If you could, maybe quickly run us through how someone should go about product launch. If you could maybe talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. I'm going through this right now. So there are different types of launches, right? So what I do is like first I identify how big is going to be the launch to decide, I need a lot of effort or not. So Product Marketing Alliance has like a tier system, tier 1, 2, or 3. But this depends. You can decide which is your the best way. But there are like launches that just like, depends on retention. They retain a customer base. And then it's like a more small launch, and then there's like a big new product. Like I'm going through this now, where we have a completely new product, new segment, and everything. So I go through a lot of understanding the product first, trying to understand the data that we have. Have you done any research prior to the launch? So I try to understand all that, but I'm also set the expectation, right? Because there's a lot of people involved in the launch, and they need to know the dates and the milestones of things like, the products, when I need to know when the product is going to be tested. I need to know when we expect it to go live. We are going live with the beta first. So all these I map, and then I started to do all the work and all the tasks, and I use like Jira now, or spreadsheet, whatever, with everything that we need to do in each stage of the launch. And sometimes you need to educate the people what launches mean, because I'm going through this right now. There are a bit confusion around of like, what is the launch? And I was like, okay, there is one date that we are gonna use as like a date to communicate to everyone. But this is the launch, and this is what we are planning to do before, during, and after. And if it's a big launch, you need a bit of more time. And I tell them this is the amount of time that we need for the launch, and these are all the things, so everybody knows. And then I work with separate departments to get ready for the launch, assess everything that we have, that we need, and if we need to get help from outside, like agencies and all that, which I'm going through this right now. So there's a lot of moving parts that you have to manage. And then once you launch, I always say this: don't forget about it. Oh, the launch is done. That's it.
Yeah.
You have always go back and see what is working, what is not working. An amplification. I call this now is an amplification phase. And we continue the work after that. It's not a done job. But yeah, a big launch can be overwhelming sometimes, but it's fun as well. It's very fun. Not going to be perfect. They normally are not perfect. There's always a problem, always something that you're not expecting. And then is where the strategic thinking, helps a lot. Okay, I know I'm not going to meet this date. What can I do now? So yeah, so that's basically in a very high level, how I do separate the size of the launch. And when a big launch, everyone's involved, big budget, all the resources, and set the expectation of the amount of time that we need for each thing to be done, so we can launch. And then when you go to a smaller launch, I normally have a list of things that I need for the smaller launch that I cannot miss. And then the very, very small one is more like probably like a customer, like I said, customer retention. Then we do a small campaign for that. But yeah, that's the big thing of product marketing launches.
Awesome. Great. So these were all the questions that I had for you today, Aline, and I absolutely loved all the answers and the way you delivered them. So I had a great time, and I'm sure everybody who's going to watch this episode is going to have an absolutely amazing time. So thank you so much for doing this. Thank you so much for finding the time. Yeah.
Thank you. I always have fun talking about product marketing because I really like it. And it's there are days that is hard, especially if you are the only one. So I always think like, if I have someone here to share, and then I go back to the community of product marketeers. So we all help each other. So that said, if someone wants to reach out to me and have like questions or wants to share something that is working in customers interviews or positioning, you can reach me in LinkedIn. So yeah, it's the best way to keep in touch.
Awesome.
So